A warm, pleasant good morning from outside the Oklahoma State Capitol. I'm Dave Morris, alongside my colleague from the Oklahoman, Mr. Ben Felder, and I say that half tongue-in-cheek. It's not warm out here at all. It's actually kind of cold and chilly.
No, it's not as cold as it was Monday, but we're kind of away from the building here, and so we got that Oklahoma wind. So yeah.
The Oklahoma wind is always present, and these days outside the Oklahoma State Capitol, large crowds are always present. They were here early this morning. I left out of the Capitol. I should say it's Clergy Day at the Capitol. When I left out of the Capitol before 9 o'clock, there was a line stretching to get in from that east side of the Capitol all the way to the far west side of the sidewalk. It's going to take them a long time to get in, but they seem quite determined and happy to wait it out.
Yeah, Senate's meeting this morning, so a lot of people were getting here early to try to get some seats in the viewing gallery or fill up the rotunda just outside the Senate doors. And over the last couple of days, we've really seen that focus towards the legislature, the Senate and the House, and we'll get into last night's House action. But a lot of teachers inside that continue to chant, trying to make their voices heard, even while lawmakers are on the floor in their chambers, chanting as loud as they can to make sure that they know that they're out there.
Already this morning it was through the floors. For example, if you wanted to go from the third floor to the fourth floor, one on, one off. The troopers do a good job of policing crowd control on the inside. You mentioned last night, we'll jump into that, the House passed House Bill 1019XX. What does that mean? What does that not mean?
Well, it is a sales tax on third-party internet sales. So companies and individuals that sell, for example, on Amazon, the state will now be able to collect a sales tax on that. That's going to generate roughly about an estimate of $20 million. There was a little bit of a debate on the floor of the House last night on whether or not this money should be specifically earmarked for education. Ultimately, it was approved to do that. So it's about $20 million to be added to the general education fund starting in 2020, so not right away. But last night, we've talked the last few days about how teachers have kind of, about 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock have kind of left, but the House was meeting into the evening, so a lot of teachers remained on the inside to follow the House proceedings. In fact, today's Oklahoman front page photo of the teachers kind of on the edge of their seat watching the vote on the screens outside. People were relaying information back to the crowd. They continued to chant when there was a debate, when a lawmaker was arguing against the bill. They were trying to, they were chanting "shame on you" and trying to make their voices heard. But at the end of the day, overwhelmingly it passed. It has to go to the Senate now. But there was an eruption of cheers. So teachers celebrated this vote, but very quickly their chants turned to we're not going anywhere. We're coming back tomorrow. So the OEA praised the bill. They said this is a good step in the right direction, but teachers in the OEA continue to say that more needs to be raised. We hope to kind of get some more details on kind of what some of those funding figures look like. What's the target? Based on my conversations with people, I really feel like you're probably looking at anywhere between $100 and $200 million is really what the OEA would like to see. So yesterday's $20 million is a step in that direction, but teachers have come back out this morning to try to get more legislation passed.
Among the items on today's agenda for the OEA, though, they will have a rally at 11 a.m. outside the Capitol on the steps there. OEA President Alicia will be among those speaking, along with Clark Fraley. Again, I mentioned it's Clergy Day at the Capitol around 8 o'clock this morning. Various members of the local faith-based community held an event on the fourth floor of the Capitol. There was a prayer, there was singing. I spoke with Lori Walkie afterwards. I was like, how many different versions can you come up with of this little light of mine? Yeah. She goes, I came up with 5 in the shower this morning, and that's what we did. Yeah. So our Carla Hinton, the Oklahoman's religion editor, tagged along with her this morning, chatting with various members of the faith-based community, and they said, hey, selfishly, we got a skin in the game in this as well. We have sons and daughters. If the teachers walk out, that affects us in our households, but it also affects the community and others, and we've talked about how this is a far-reaching story.
Yeah, and we've talked about before about how churches are kind of playing a part in this. Lots have announced that they're providing drop-in childcare. For a lot of families with school closed, they're down to limited options on what to do with their kids. So a lot of churches have kind of played that role, or providing other activities or meals, backpacks. A lot of churches already kind of help provide some of those backpack feeding programs over the weekend. So churches have really kind of played a part. And you talk about the presence of clergy. I mean, there's a presence of a lot of different groups that aren't just teachers. I mean, there's parent groups, there's state employees. There was some controversy yesterday with some lawmakers saying that there were some outside agitators or outside protesters. The Department of Public Safety said that they had observed some of that and was monitoring the situation. They didn't really provide any additional details. I wrote about this yesterday that, I've talked to literally hundreds of people. I've been at almost every square inch of this rally inside and out. And everything I've seen is peaceful. It's been intense at time, but nothing even close to violence or controversy. I have not seen any outside protest groups. I mean, I have seen some outside groups in the sense that there's candidates who are running for office that are taking advantage of the situation and the people here. There's different initiative petitions that are circulating. There was I walked by and there was a desk set up with a woman saying that eyeglasses are more expensive in Oklahoma than other states. I'm not really sure what she was representing, but it just kind of gives you an idea that it's kind of a carnival midway of political causes here at the Capitol grounds. So there are some outside groups, but I have not seen the kind of agitators, so to speak, that there's been some claims of.
To that point, I spoke with former gubernatorial Democrat candidate Joe Dorman this morning and asked him why he was here. And of course, they're doing the same thing, taking advantage of the groups that are here. And he lended his ideas of what should happen. You can watch that interview on newsok.com. One thing that might be good we have an interview with Alicia Priest coming up later this morning to chat with her on. And the OEA has mentioned this, but perhaps some definition could be provided. A group of teachers from Minco came up to our 10 Money this morning, and they were a little bit confused about ball and dice or this bill or that bill. I think perhaps there's a bit of confusion of teachers are saying, what should we be pulling for? What should we be following? Where is the money?
Yeah, and I think we're probably going to hear more specifics on that in the coming days. There's been some criticism that maybe we should have heard about some of the specifics since day one. We've talked about OEA's role in this. They are kind of leading the logistics of the walkout. They were the ones that called for the April 2nd date, but have really been following teachers too. And the OEA since the beginning had said, hey, these are our demands, but we're going to leave it up to the legislature to decide how to fund it. A couple weeks before the walkout, they did come out with their own funding proposal, and some of those tax increases were approved last week by the legislature, and some lawmakers continue to say, look at what we did last week. You're out here asking for more. More just can't be done. Teachers believe otherwise and are still out here. But yeah, ball and dice, gaming, we expect to see that. The capital gains tax deduction. That still seems like a pretty big lift in the legislature, but to remove that deduction, and it would pump tens of millions of dollars, into the budget that teachers want to see earmarked for education. Once again, this is we talk about, when the rubber meets the road inside this building, tax increases are not a popular concept. They have not passed a tax increase until last week, going back to the early 90s. And so lawmakers, I was in some of the offices yesterday as teachers were pleading with lawmakers to reconsider their votes, and some lawmakers just very politely said, I'm just not going to change my mind on this. And one teacher, she kind of said, well, I'm praying that you do. And that's kind of what it looks like inside, for those teachers that are able to talk to some lawmakers face to face. But at the end of the day, it's going to take votes changing from no to yes on some of these key measures, and teachers say they're going to continue to put up the pressure. We did hear that OEA had put in a permit for next week. Of course, we've said, those teachers that are marching from Tulsa to Oklahoma City, they won't arrive here until Tuesday. So there's already plans for this walkout to stretch into next week.
I spoke to a teacher from Moore this morning inside. She indicated the same thing. She's going to be here every day as long as it continues. You may hear some horns in the background. A lot of the signs that the teachers and those rallying here are carrying say, hey, honk, for your support. So there's that. We saw that a group of teachers and supporters from Yukon are marching this morning from Yukon to the state capitol. And you mentioned that group from Tulsa headed this way as well. As always, Ben, I'll ask you this question. What storylines are you following today?
Well, we just got, once again, kind of trying to track some of the legislative proceedings on the inside. Justin Wingert, our federal government reporter, is actually in the building, kind of giving some backup on that end.
So I am this morning.
We're going to continue to talk to teachers, talk about the message they're trying to send to lawmakers. One of the stories that I'm also kind of taking a look at is, this is a big. It's not just a big moment here at the Capitol. This is a big moment in a lot of communities. When schools close, there's a disruption that goes in, and so we're going to continue to try to talk to families and parents about how they're handling this walkout, and continue to talk to teachers about how long they're willing to last.
It'll be very, very interesting. We'll have ongoing coverage, as Ben mentioned, on our website, newsok.com, and our various social media platforms. Ben, we mentioned we were going to have an interview with Alicia Priest this morning, and we'll have a more in-depth interview. But she's right here, so she's going to jump right in our live shot. Alicia, it's great to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
President of OEA, and Ben, if you want to fire away a few questions for her. Hey, how's today going so far? Clergy Day here at the Capitol. I know you have
fantastic. The Oklahoma Pastors for Kids has been a very supportive group throughout this. We love having a partnership with them.
Let me ask you, yesterday you guys came out with a poll showing that of likely voters in Oklahoma, I think it was 68% said that they supported the walkout, and it was a 10-point jump from last week. Talk about the public support and why that. I mean, your poll showed that the public is on your side, at least when it comes to voters. Why is that important?
So early media and legislators, even superintendent, were talking about this as a teacher pay raise. But for us, it was never just about the pay raise. That's an important aspect to keep teachers in the classroom here in Oklahoma, but it's about our kids. And so that message resonates with parents because we all want better for our students.
Is that something, as you think about how long this may go, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you guys you're prepared to go another week with permitting and logistics here at the Capitol. Teachers continue to say, we're in it for the long haul, we'll stay here for as long as it takes. But is there any concern on your part that, after a week, after 2 weeks, after 3 weeks, for some parents that may say, hey, I support the teachers, but man, I got to get my kids in school. I mean, what are kind of your thoughts on the work you're trying to do here and juggling that with, potential risk of harm for students that are staying out of school?
Right, so student days will be made up. There are schools, like we got an email from our superintendent, because my daughter's in school, that said they'll make it up by doing this, this, and this when it's over. And so I think we are monitoring that. We're in constant contact with our local leaders who have the pulse and feel in their communities, and we'll address that if it comes to that. We saw movement in the legislature yesterday, and so that's positive for us. And so we just have a little bit more work to do.
Yeah, you talk about last night, teachers remained late into the evening as the House was meeting, continuing to chant and make their voices heard. Yeah. We saw the third-party sales tax, or internet sales tax, approved by the House. A lot of cheers when that vote went through, but then chants of we're coming back. So a step in the right direction. You said this right after the vote, hey, right, this is good work, but we need more. So my question is, what are we looking at here in terms of the dollar amount that it's going to take to provide that substantial boost to public education that you feel like would bring the walkout to an end?
Right, so we know 28% cuts over the last 10 years has created a huge hole in the education budget. And so we know that we're not going to be able to get back to that funding level in year one. So we have to have a pathway forward. We need the legislature to show us that they're committed to that pathway forward to getting us back to the funding from 2007, 2008, and beyond. Our teachers want more than a textbook a student. They need to be able to get those supplies that they need. We heard a teacher talk about doing an experiment with her students on mealworms, and the district couldn't even afford the mealworms to do the experiment, nor were any of her speakers working, so they gathered around and watched a silent video of someone else dissecting the mealworms. We can't have that.
And so the number you've asked for is $200 million originally to kind of make up for that decade
Correct.
Of lost funding. When you look at the textbook funding that was approved last week and about $18 million additional, the $20 million that's it's going to go into 2020. So you're getting up. You add that up, it's close to $100 million.
Right.
Of new funding for public education. How much more do you feel like it's gonna need? Because a lot of teachers and others are saying, all right, what's the end game here? What's the amount? If the legislature were to come out with a bill today that added another $50 million, would that be enough? Do you have an amount, a target?
Right, we're very close, but the reality is it has to pass all the steps. It needs to pass the Senate. We need ball and dice to pass the Senate. We need the Amazon tax bill to pass the Senate, and needed to be signed by the governor. And so we're really close. We had asked for $75 million in year one, and we're concerned still about the hotel motel tax being backed out. We're still concerned about when the gas tax and the cigarette tax go to other agencies. It leaves a hole in the funding for education for next year. So that's why we need to see a path forward and how they're going to address those things.
Well, Alicia, I appreciate your time. Thanks for letting us ambush you here on the live feed.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Ben, interesting comments there. And I think that's the relevant question is, what's the end game? What's the goal line look like timeline wise?
Yeah, I mean, just hearing, we still didn't hear a specific number on what it's going to take. Whether or not that's part of the strategy. I mean, the OEA, the teachers could be saying, hey, we want to get as much as we can right now before we start setting that. But
that's what you do in negotiations.
But a lot of lawmakers continue to say, all right, tell us what it's going to take. I mean, to be fair, the OEA did put out a very detailed list of demands last month when they first announced that the strike was coming. It was $800 million in new funding and $200 million of additional funding to public education. But like you said, when you start to add up the $33 million for textbooks, about $18 million that's going into the education budget general fund, if the sales tax, the internet third-party sales tax eventually goes through with the Senate and the governor, I mean, you're talking about another 20. So we're getting about halfway to what their original demands were, and it'll just be interesting to see if those things go through, what more they'll be asking for.
And the timeline of how fast they possibly go through.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. I mean, I think it's fair to say that last night's vote on the third-party sales tax probably does not happen without this demonstration here. The vote probably doesn't happen last night without this demonstration here, and there was an amendment added to it that earmarked it specifically for public education, and that may not go through if it wasn't for the presence of teachers here. So I think it's fair to say that they have made a difference when it comes to the legislative process here at the Capitol when you just look at votes on bills. But once again, the OEA teachers are still back out here. They say more needs to be done.
It's interesting. You spoke to, and I'll wrap it up here, you spoke to a couple of teachers yesterday who perhaps were, as you mentioned earlier, a little bit frustrated with the response they got from their representatives. Both sides kind of dug in, hey, I'm not going to change my vote. A teacher I spoke with this morning, she indicated she had a good conversation with her legislature. So I'm assuming that teachers are seeing both sides of reactions.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are. I mean, and this has kind of started to become a little bit of a partisan issue. The Democrats have made some attempts to, for example, bring the capital gains exemption repeal onto the floor unsuccessfully. I mean, when the House has met, you've seen Democrats that have tried to, raise point of orders or expedite bills onto the floor for a vote, and Republican leadership hasn't really gone along, at least until last night, with the amendment that earmarked the sales tax for public education. So yeah, I mean, in fact, Democrats have been exiting the House floor, raising a clenched fist and pumping up the crowd. And so, right now Democrats really feel like this is this is kind of a good moment for them. But I will say, I mean, we've talked about this before. I don't know that this is not so much a partisan issue for teachers. I mean, this is a bipartisan group of educators that are out here. In fact, one teacher that was talking to a lawmaker yesterday, she was rebuking the comments that Governor Fallin had made about kind of comparing teachers to teenagers wanting a car. And she said, like, hey, I love her. So I took that as a sign that she supports her. She's like, I think she meant well, but man, it just doesn't help when she says things like that. So even supporters of, the Republican legislature here, and most teachers are Republican. We've looked at that. We've compared the voter rolls and compared it to the teaching license list. They reflect the state as a whole. This is a largely conservative Republican state, or largely anti-tax state, but yet educators are out here demanding change.
We'll leave it right there. Big thanks to Todd and Paige back at the control room with the Oklahoman for helping us produce, and Tim Money behind the camera right here. Nice job of grabbing Alicia Priest. We appreciate her time this morning, the OEA president. She will be back live on the stage 11 a.m. We'll have that live on newsok.com. The rally continues. I believe there's another one scheduled for this afternoon at 1:30 as well. Ben Felder, Justin Wingeter, Carla Hinton out here at the Capitol, among others from the Oklahoman, providing coverage. And as you mentioned, not just here, but also across the community. And the community is certainly weighing in their support this morning outside the Capitol. Ben, thanks for your time.
Yeah, you bet.
All right, ongoing coverage at newsok.com.